Hello, I'm Jason Christopher. This is number 0837, the Stuff File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File Program, number 0837. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File Program, retired firefighter Anthony Ajduk is the author of A Firefighter's Life, the highs, the lows, and being burnt by PTSD. He dealt with PTSD during his 31-year career. But when did it start?
It was only with hindsight, after I'd gone down and then had some treatment. But I would say that those symptoms for PTSD were occurring probably quite early in my career, probably within 10 to 15 years. But I just disregarded them really as, look, this is normal, this is okay, I'm dealing with all of this, it's no real problem. And so it wasn't really until I learned more about it through my treatment that I realised that it had been happening for quite some time.
Brian Glow is an international illusionist, a comedy magician, and also an anti-bullying and suicide awareness advocate who spreads the anti-bullying message to youths. He too was a bullied youth.
Well, unfortunately, my bullying was more than just taunting. It became quite physical. I was once stabbed, I was choked, I was thrown down 3 flights of stairs. Even though we contacted the police and I told my parents, really nothing got done. It drags on you over and over. When someone is, or a gang of people are constantly trying to malign you, you start having second thoughts about yourself, about whether you are worthy. And from my perspective, 3 friends of mine died by suicide, and they were affected by some of the same bullying.
Dog trainer Kathleen, author of Dear Dylan's Dog Squad, is back on the show with some tips like how to get through doggy depression as the summer is over and the people who play with the dog most are heading back to school.
You know, dogs thrive on love and purpose, and they're happiest when they have a job to do. And that job is taking care of you. So summertime for them, it means fun, the kids are home, they got more activities to do, life is great. As a parent, you may be thinking, hey, school is rolling around and summer is over and there'll be a little time for me, a little quiet time. Your dog doesn't know that. All he knows is that the party is suddenly over, and he's not in it.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest later, the person who told you this was show number 0837, was Jason Christopher, who is the author of the Dying of the Light series. He was also a guest talking about his books back on show number 0832. You can go and hear what Jason has to say. And thank you very much, Jason, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File Program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. A couple of weeks ago, we had Pete Melfi, the founder and commissioner of the Florida Man Games, and I mentioned to him in that conversation that I honestly try to avoid some Florida stories here on the Stuff File program because they're just like low-hanging fruit. There are so many of them. But here we are starting with not one but 2 Florida stories. In St. Petersburg, 58-year-old Marcia Morgan was arrested for covering a neighbor's car with toilet paper. The incident occurred at 4 p.m. while Morgan was dressed in a hot dog costume. She was charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Morgan, who was also intoxicated at the time, refused to cooperate with the investigation. She pleaded no contest to the misdemeanor charges and was fined $550 with the option to work it off through community service. The reason behind her choice of attire during the incident remains unknown. The bizarre event unfolded outside her rented home. Okay, never mind why she was wearing a hot dog costume. What I want to know is the order of things. Did she don the costume before or after she was intoxicated? Yeah. And our second Florida story, a 44-year-old man is behind bars for allegedly headbutting his girlfriend during an argument that erupted when he began watching pornography while they were having sex.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I couldn't make that up if I tried. According to police, the incident occurred at around 3 a.m. when Donald Naples and his 50-year-old girlfriend were engaged in consensual sex. However, the woman became upset when Naples simultaneously started viewing adult entertainment. Well, maybe he thought it was a tutorial video. Anyway, when the victim told Naples to stop and, quote, finish himself, unquote, he allegedly responded by headbutting her in the nose, causing significant bleeding. The woman was treated for her injuries at a local hospital. Naples, who has a prior battery conviction, declined to provide a statement to police. He was arrested and charged with a felony count, as his alleged assault on his girlfriend occurred within the context of their 6-month romantic relationship. I'm going out on a limb that this relationship is over. Yeah. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, with me, Peter Anthony Holder, a 38-year-old man known to police as the Butt Sniffer was arrested in Burbank, California, for allegedly sniffing a woman's behind inside a Walgreens store.
Walgreens is making wonderful things happen.
Khalees Crowder, a registered sex offender currently on parole, was recognized by Walgreens employees who reported the incident to police shortly before 11 p.m. Officers responded, spoke to the victim, and took Crowder into custody nearby without incident. This was Crowder's second arrest in Burbank for similar behavior. In July, he was arrested for sexually harassing a female customer at a Nordstrom Rack store, where surveillance footage showed him following a woman, crouching near her, and inappropriately sniffing her buttocks.
Rack your way at Nordstrom Rack.
According to police, Crowder has a history of committing such offenses in Burbank and Glendale dating back to 2021.
Isn't it nice there's a Walgreens nearby?
Not when there's a butt sniffer on the loose. Yeah. Anyway, let's get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Anthony Ajduk is a retired firefighter in Australia who has written a book called A Firefighter's Life, The Highs, the Lows, and Being Burnt by PTSD. Anthony joins us from Perth, Australia via riverside.com. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Peter. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the program with us. A lot of times when people say they're firefighters, it's something that they wanted to do since childhood. Is that your case?
No, it certainly wasn't. I started going out with a girl in my late teens whose father was a firefighter, and every time I went to see her, I noticed that he was always at home, seemed to have a lot of time off, and I discovered that he worked 2 days and 2 nights and had 4 days off. And I thought, gee, this sounds like a pretty good gig. And so that's when I started applying. It wasn't until I sort of got part the way through the recruitment process that I realised this was actually more than just a job. It was a full-on career that was, involved with people and helping people, and that's what really got me inspired to go through and do 31 years.
When did some of the issues that you have had dealing with PTSD, when did they begin?
Look, I'd say, and it was only with hindsight after I'd gone down and then had some treatment, but I would say that those symptoms and things for PTSD were occurring probably quite early in my career, probably within 10 to 15 years, or 10 years, I would say. But I just disregarded them really as, look, this is normal, this is okay, I'm dealing with all of this, it's no real problem. And so it wasn't really until I learned more about it through my treatment that I realised that it had been happening for quite some time.
When did you first discover that you were having this situation? Was it a specific situation that you had while in your firefighting career, or was it an an accumulative thing?
Well, it certainly is a cumulative thing that happens, PTSD, and certainly in my case it was. So it built up over many years, but it was one final incident on October the 19th in 2012 that tipped me over the edge, that broke the glass, as they say, and allowed everything to flow out.
When did you decide that you needed to seek treatment? First of all, when did you discover that you had an issue, and how soon after that did you seek treatment?
So the incident happened on a Thursday night, and it was on the Saturday night after my wife and I had been out to a social function, and a few things happened that night that I realised I was not well. And she said to me while we laid in bed that night, "You're not good, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not good." And it was actually on the Monday morning that I sought help, and was very fortunate that my doctor could see me straight away. And I was very fortunate again that the clinical psychologist that he referred me to had a cancellation that afternoon, and I was able to start getting treatment almost immediately.
And exactly how did PTSD in your case manifest itself?
So with me, it manifested itself in a number of ways. Firstly, in extreme anxiety. And for me, anxiety was this feeling of not being able to get enough air into my lungs, feeling that I was just struggling to breathe and having to take these big, deep breaths to feel as though I'd got enough air. And then as soon as I'd done that, I would have to do it again very shortly after, this anxiety. Also, I was having flashbacks. I had feelings of isolation, like I was standing behind a glass wall being isolated from everybody around me, that I could see them and could try and communicate with them, but they had no idea that I was there. I would have panic attacks. I would get angry very quickly. My temper was out of control. And some other symptoms, but they were the major ones. Oh, and hypervigilance, becoming really hypervigilant in my surroundings, and then wanting to just be at home. My home was my safe sanctuary, and that was the only place that I really felt secure, even though the mood swings and the isolation, not so much the isolation, but the anxiety would still happen at home, but I did feel a lot more secure at home, and that's where I wanted to be.
Exactly how long in your 31-year career did this start manifesting itself and you sought treatment?
Well, I didn't seek treatment until right at the very end, well, a year before the end, when that incident happened. That was when I sought the treatment. I had not sought any treatment prior to that because I didn't think in my own mind that I was suffering. But as I previously said, that it was only once I was with the clinical psychologist and she helped me to understand what had happened and why it had happened, that I looked back over those years and realised that for many years I had been suffering but was not recognising or accepting it.
Who do you exactly think of as your readers? Who did you write the book for?
I wrote it really I wrote it for firefighters, because I wanted them to be very aware that this can happen to any of them at any time, and for a lot of people it will happen. And because with firefighters there is still this lingering thing about, toughen up, you should be able to do this, what's the matter with you? So there's still a little bit of that around in the job, not as bad these days as what it was. But I also wanted to write the book for the public, the non-first responders, to gain an awareness and an acceptance that PTSD is wrongly named, really. It should be post-traumatic stress injury, that it's actually an injury of the brain, and it's a mental health issue and an injury that needs to be treated as such and not as a disorder or a syndrome that can be labelled without employers being able to put in the right measures to start the prevention of this well into, initially into someone's career when they first start, so that it's an ongoing process, just like any of our training. This should be an awareness program right from day one.
How widespread do you think PTSD is within the firefighting community?
I think it's extremely widespread. I would say that there's probably only 10 or 15% of cases being actually reported and recorded. And admittedly, my evidence of that is only anecdotal. From speaking to people since my book has come out, I have had so many firefighters say to me, I am so glad that I read this book. It's prompted me to go and get treatment because I was clearly suffering. And others who have said, I'm glad I read the book because I realise I'm not alone. There are other people suffering from this and I'm not going through this by myself. I felt like I was reading a story about myself. So I think it's extremely widespread, not just in firefighting, but in emergency services over the whole spectrum.
Would it be fair to say that there is somebody out there who is reading your book, especially if they're a firefighter, and not realizing that they have PTSD until they read your book?
Oh, very much so. I think there's many first responders and firefighters specifically that are subject to that, exactly the same as I was. I had read a couple of books about it, not from firefighters, because I believe my book is the first in Australia that has been written by an Australian firefighter specifically about the subject. But I certainly read some books and I didn't put myself in that same boat as those people writing the book until sometime afterwards. And I started to realise that, gee, I think I'm reading a story about myself here.
What year did you retire, by the way?
I retired in 2013.
And how do you feel now?
Look, I feel great now. I still have issues that come up. There are still triggers that bring on some of the symptoms, but I think I'm in a better position to manage those now, and that's what it's about for me. It's about managing it, and I don't think you ever get rid of it. I think it's there for a lifetime, and you have to learn to manage it properly. And, you know, if that means every now and then going back and seeing your clinical psych, then so be it. That's what you need to do. But my wife's a really good gauge of how I'm travelling. She is very astute at picking up, probably before me, when I'm starting to, go off the rails a little bit. So I'm thankful for that. But it's a management process now.
If you had it all to do again, would you go into firefighting?
In a heartbeat. Without doubt, I would do it again. It is such a great job. I worked with some fantastic people who became lifelong friends who I can talk to now, and we have a bond because we know what each other are talking about that other people outside of the service simply don't understand. And also because it was a very, very satisfying job. I mean, the downside is, yes, it can have a terrible effect on us, but when you do save someone's life or someone who's having the worst day of their life, if you can make it a little bit better, it is deeply satisfying.
Well, if you were to go into this profession again, if you had the chance to do it all again, what do you know now that would offset what befell you during your career?
Oh, I would know that when these feelings of anxiety and those sorts of symptoms come on, which I didn't recognise before, I didn't know what they were, but when they come on, that's your first signal that something is wrong here, that you need to seek some form of assistance. Knowing that, also, I spent most of my time as a frontline operator. I didn't have much time off shift at all over those years, and I think I would certainly, if I did it again, I would take time off the front line, time off shift, go and do some alternate duties that would just give my mind a rest from that constant exposure to trauma.
I know the rank and file probably would enjoy this particular book, but have you reached out to anybody in management within the fire department to explain and share your story? And were they receptive to that?
So initially when I reached out to the wellness department and offered my services for no charge to speak to firefighters at any level about what I'd gone through, the response was not great, and in fact there was no response. However, since the book has come out, I've had the wellness department have contacted me on numerous occasions. They came to one of my talks at one of our local libraries one night. They bought a number of books off me. They have been far more communicative with me and have suggested that hopefully in the future they will get the approval to be able to use me in some form, to be able to talk to the rank and file, to hopefully assist them in getting much more awareness out about PTSD.
Well, congratulations on the book, and also kudos to you for not only helping fellow firefighters, but giving an understanding to what your life was like as a firefighter. And I think it's something not just for firefighters in general or first responders, but for the general population. Anthony, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you very much, Peter, for having me. Much appreciated.
Anthony Ajduk, author of A Firefighter's Life, The Highs and Lows of Being Burnt by PTSD. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0837, and you'll find links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order Anthony's book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
Did you hear about the circus fire? It was intense!
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffileprogram. program.
I'm standing here and I'm smiling. For Canada. Hi, I'm Ian Thomas, and yes, I really am smiling because there is nowhere that makes me happier than Canada. We're the envy of the world, and we need to protect this precious place. We can buy Canadian products to save Canadian jobs and support Canadian businesses. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Coming to you from the outskirts of sanity, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come in the program, we will talk to Brian Glow, who's an international illusionist and also an anti-bullying advocate. Plus, Kathleen Troy is along once again to talk about dog training. This time we're talking about doggy depression with kids going back to school. We also have a morning shower thought and, of course, an idiot of the day coming your way a little later on. Right here, right now, we have more Stuff File news, however. Authorities have charged a North Carolina elections official with drugging his granddaughter's ice cream. Investigators allege that 66-year-old James Yockley Jr. surreptitiously added cocaine and MDMA to the Dairy Queen blizzards consumed by the two young girls.
Upon first glance, this would appear to be an Oreo blizzard from Dairy Queen. But look closer.
Yockley reportedly flagged down a police officer, claiming pills had been discovered in the desserts. While the children did not ingest the substances, tests confirmed the presence of illegal drugs.
Look closer still.
Surveillance footage purportedly shows Yockley himself tampering with the ice cream. The Surrey County Board of Elections chair now faces felony counts of child abuse, drug possession, and contaminating food or drink. Yockley was released on a $100,000 bond, but is barred from contacting the victims. Yeah, this isn't going to be the funny story that they share around the Thanksgiving table in years to come.
Great treats and great food. At DQ, there's more than one way to treat yourself when you look a little closer.
And here's the story of another potential scam. Rosalba M. Chiuli of Middletown, Connecticut, said she fell outside a Goodwill thrift store, injuring herself, and hired a lawyer to sue. The store had security cameras and forwarded the video to its insurance company, which turned it over to the nonprofit National Insurance Crime Bureau, which then turned it over to the Middletown Police, which started an investigation. That all took a full year, but Chiuli, now 62, has been arrested on a warrant charging felony insurance fraud. The video, investigators say, shows the fall was staged and pre-planned with two apparent accomplices. Chiuli then walked into the store and claimed to have slipped on a banana peel. There was no sign of any bananas in the video. Once he saw the video, Chiuli's lawyer withdrew from the case. Chiuli has filed other injury claims in the past, and at least one went to trial. That case was dismissed, with no payment to Chiuli, the day before the alleged banana incident. I hope in this criminal case, when the verdict is issued, all 12 jury members will rise in unison and sing,
"Yes, we have no bananas. We have no bananas today. Bananas today."
In which case, it's time Chiuli started contributing to society, such as getting a 35-cent an hour job cleaning the kitchen at the York Correctional Institution in Niantic. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, one of my closest friends is a plumber named David Soroka, whom I used to have on my old radio show to answer plumbing questions from callers. David is a stickler for doing his job right and also a stickler for preventative measures. For decades, he's complained about people flushing wet wipes in the toilet. Well, this story certainly highlights the problem with doing just that. The United Kingdom is undertaking an unprecedented effort to address a growing environmental issue in the Thames River. Authorities have launched a project to mechanically remove an estimated 180 tons of compacted wet wipes that have formed a sizable island near Hammersmith Bridge in London. To put it into perspective, that's 15 double-decker buses worth of wet wipes.
So they're raking up all the wet wipes, they're shaking them, and so all the animals and the flora and the fauna can drop out. And then the wet wipes, 180 tons of wet wipes, will be taken off and disposed of safely in landfill. This is going to take a month. It's going to cost £200,000, funded by the Port of London Authority.
This operation marks the UK's first large-scale removal of such river pollution. This cleanup campaign follows years of manual removal efforts by the local charity Thames 21, whose data on the scale of the wet wipes pollution helped spur the authorities to intervene. Experts hope this action will aid the Thames' ecological recovery, as microplastics from the wipes have been found inside the river's fish populations. Plumber David was always ahead of his time. He says there's no such thing as a flushable wet wipe. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Brian Glow is a successful international illusionist and comedy magician. He's also an anti-bullying and suicide awareness advocate who also spreads an anti-bullying message to youths. This all comes out of the fact that he, too, was a bullied youth. To share a little bit of his journey, Brian joins us from Winnipeg via Riverside.com. Hi, Brian.
Really my pleasure. I can't wait to dive deep.
Now, I understand that you not only do this anti-bullying message to youths, but you do it in some of the remote areas of the country. Is that a problem, that there is more bullying in more rural areas where there are less people and maybe less resources to help against bullying?
Exactly right. I go to the most remote communities because they have the least amount of help. There's, for the most part, no psychiatrists or social workers coming up. There are almost fewer any resources. Through the schools, they try their best, but they're just ill-equipped for the severity of the kind of bullying that leads towards suicide tendencies. This is something I discovered decades ago, and I started doing this really in 1978. But in the meantime, I kind of went all in about 20 years ago, specifically when I heard that the highest suicide rates per capita in Canada were in the Arctic. So I had some wonderful training in the past from the University of Winnipeg and degrees in psychology and anthropology and computer science. And I just used those skills along with my performance abilities to craft messaging and link it with magic the same way I've been doing for my major corporate clients around the world. So I will take a product or a sales message or a theme and I'll design tricks around them. So I did the same thing with anti-bullying and suicide awareness messaging, trying to make it as indelible and easy to listen and watch and retain as possible. One of the biggest problems is they hear the messaging over and over and over again from different sources because the message is pretty clear, but it's not staying, it's not being used. And I think the biggest problem is because they may have heard it and don't know what to do, the issues keep coming up over and over and over again quite severely.
Okay, well, let's go back a little bit to when you were young and you were bullying, or bullied rather. What was the extent of the type of bullying that you experienced?
Well, unfortunately, my bullying was more than just taunting. It became quite physical. I was once stabbed. I was choked. I was thrown down 3 flights of stairs. This is before internet, of course, so I had crank calls that got quite aggressive and mean and scary, frankly. Even though we'd contacted the police and I told my parents, really nothing got done. And the schools at that point were kind of the same attitude as even my parents were, toughen up. That's not the answer, no matter what you want to do. And it drags on you over and over. When someone is, or a gang of people are constantly trying to malign you, you start having second thoughts about yourself, about whether you are worthy. And from my perspective, 3 friends of mine died by suicide, and they were affected by some of the same bullying. I was going to quite a good school, and it was not the fact that the school was bad. It was a very small group of people that were taught that others weren't as good as them. And it got worse and worse and worse as the junior high and high school years went through, to the point where I was quite literally close to a breaking point. And then I had enough resiliency in me that I let it shrug off. The moment I hit university and everything stopped, it was like 1,000,000 pounds lifted from my chest. And then everything stopped and everything was wonderful, and I've never had a problem since. So I started using what I learned to not only teach kids, but adults, teachers, elderly, the same techniques that I started learning. And I'm quite a proponent of a child psychologist named Izzy Kallman, who wrote an amazing book called Turning Bullies to Buddies, and other authors, of course, too. But he was one of my favorites because it was in such plain language and it was something that was quite teachable. And he was explaining the best techniques on resiliency, which I'll go into later. And I started using those and teaching others about it.
Now, I assume that you talk in front of large groups, maybe assemblies at schools. Would that be correct?
Right. Yes, sir.
So I would also assume that there is a distinct possibility that 1 or 2 bullies are in the audience.
Absolutely, and I craft the messaging towards them as well. I think that, and everyone seems to agree, that for the most part, in 99% of the times that bullying is active, it's a learned behavior. It's kids who've had things done to them and are retaliating by trying to get their own power back by visiting those same problems on others so that they can feel good about themselves. Really, everything is about dominance. When you have a child who is feeling bad about themselves, they want to regain part of that power, so they hurt others and let them feel bad, and it tends to make them feel better. I explain in quite a demonstrative ways, and we have kids come up on stage and we do all kinds of live action dialogue back and forth where we're showing why using a resilience technique, which is showing no emotion. So say a kid comes up to me and says, "You're an idiot and you're stupid and you're fat," and this takes training. I promise you, this is not something you can do easily. I mean, you can do it easily, but it takes practice. Where you react, instead of reacting where, "I'm not an idiot, you're an idiot. I'm not stupid, you're stupid." Bullies love that because it makes them feel good. It gives them that power that they're seeking and belittles the person that is getting attacked, and it makes them feel small and foolish because they're reacting to this idiot taunting. And sometimes more than that, of course, it can get to quite a physical threat. But if you were to turn it around and someone was yelling, "You're an idiot," and you react calmly and say, "Yeah, you're right. I do such silly things sometimes. I do really stupid things sometimes. I wish I was like you. You seem to get everything right." Now, how does somebody react to that who's just taunting you, or you're agreeing with them and giving them a positive feedback? It sounds so counterintuitive, and yet it works so well. The only problem is you have to keep that up. And in your head, you're telling yourself, you're okay. You're a good person. This person's having a problem. I'm going to empathize with them. And it does work because you do have to talk to yourself. You do have to help yourself.
Do you think that bullies are inherently someone who is probably bullied at home?
Absolutely. Either at home or, through a parent, a sibling, a relative, a neighbor, an adult nearby, even a teacher. This goes on constantly, and this becomes a learned behavior. So as they are taunted and made to feel bad, they want to lash out. And, being smaller or younger, they don't want to lash out. Well, most of them can't lash out in physical ways if they're really young, because I've seen 8 and 9-year-olds bullying others. So it's not like this is something that is just a problem of teenagers and adults. It's not. So it's relatively important to know that, as they grow up and they do get power, a lot of times it does turn physical because they start enticing others to agree with them and go along with them. So you've got 3 categories. You've got bullies, you've got the bullied, and you've got the bystanders who either stand around doing nothing or they're laughing along with the bully because, frankly, they don't want to be bullied themselves. So they look like they're enjoying it or they're getting along with it. This, of course, turns around and then enhances the bully's effect on what they're doing to the other child or the other adult, because it does happen to adults. And it also gives them a feeling of superiority because these people are with them or her.
So how does someone like yourself, for instance, who is being bullied, how do you stop becoming a bully yourself?
I think for the most part, it's not an equal basis where you're being bullied and you turn into a bully. I think it's actually quite a small amount. That's why there aren't millions upon millions. Well, there are millions of bullies, but I mean, it's not as prevalent as you think it would be, and yet it's such a growing problem. I mean, face it, human beings from day one have always been the power rules. It's always been the hunters determine what the tribe eats. It determines, who's going to be chief and shaman. It's who's going to be the president or whatever. It's you have that certain amount of aggression, or you wouldn't be any good at any job that needs to have a competitive edge. It happens in business all the time where some of the biggest CEOs and people who are running massive businesses will take that chance. They're the more aggressive of the people who aren't. The others become workers. It's no difference in bullying. You have that aggression, and it's seen as power, and people like power. Everybody does. So when you are on top of the world, you want more and more and more of that feeling.
Well, it's certainly an important issue to tackle. It's certainly an important issue that you are tackling. We're just about out of time here, and I didn't even get a chance to talk about your work as a magician. People can go to your website, which is brianglow.com, correct, and find out more information about your entertainment side of life?
Yeah, absolutely. The show's been in over 45 countries. In the early 2000s, we counted over 10,000 shows. By now, that's 25 years ago. It's been a lot of shows around the world. And for the most part, major corporations, everything from holiday parties to consulting on events. I've produced shows for the Winter Olympics and the Pan American Games and major sporting events around the world. I've even produced illusions for other magicians that are going out to do shows like America's Got Talent and Britain's Got Talent and that sort of thing. So I wear a lot of hats. I do enjoy the design work, especially working with operas and theaters and rock bands. But for the most part, performing, it's everything from, we had at one time one of the largest shows in the world with 22 dancers and technicians, 3 semis, a bus, and now it's a smaller show, but it's more multi-dimensional because we use multiple screens and videos and audio and special effects to make it a giant show and yet have a smaller cast. And I think the show is even better now.
Well, Brian, again, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. It was a certain pleasure to have you on the show and talk about the very important aspect of anti-bullying. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Brian Glow, international illusionist and comedy magician, and also an anti-bullying advocate. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com. Check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0837, and you'll find links to Brian's site. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
You know what's crazy? Water. It can boil you to death, freeze you to death, and drown you, yet you still need it to survive.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestuffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestuffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, My Interviews with 2 Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, My Interviews with 2 Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
You're listening to the Stuff File program. It's a different kind of show. It's like a brown pair of shoes in a world of tuxedos. Here's Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come on the program, we will talk to Kathleen Troy, the dog trainer, about doggy depression. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on. But I've got a few more Stuff File news stories to share with you right here, right now. And yes, I have another Florida story. I think I'm going to have to create a jingle for these. Anyway, a Florida man was arrested for indecent exposure after being found wearing women's lingerie and sexual accessories in a public park. Police identified the suspect as 32-year-old Anthony Smith, who allegedly tried to evade officers initially, but was eventually apprehended. Smith was wearing a thong, fake breasts, a wig, a mask, and a penis ring, as well as a rectal plug attached to a black fox tail. Well, he may have initially evaded police, but Lord knows he's easily recognizable. This was not Smith's first run-in with the law for this type of behavior. He was previously convicted in 2017 of indecent exposure and resisting arrest for being found naked and enjoying the pleasure of his own company in public. Smith, who works as a DJ and lives with his parents, and they must be so proud, reportedly told police that engaging in lewd acts arouses him and that he does not want to violate his morals by using a female for sexual purposes. He is currently being held in jail ahead of an upcoming court appearance. So I guess home-cooked meals are out of the question. Anyway, let's get to our last guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Kathleen Troy is back on the show. She is a dog trainer and the author of Dear Dylan's Dog Squad, as well as a series of YA detective mysteries. This time, she's here to talk about the possibility of your dogs feeling depressed now that summer is winding down. With the kids going back to school, playtime with pets plummets. That could lead to a pouting pooch. Kathleen joins us via Zoom from California. Hi, Kathleen.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on the program with us once again. So, what is this situation? I often hear about people talking about their dogs. Even when they go to another room, their dog feels a certain amount of abandonment. So, do they ever get over that situation where you go to work or you go to school and your dog thinks, well, I'm on my own now?
And they order a pizza, right?
They order a pizza, yes.
Well, here's the thing. Dogs thrive on love and purpose, and they're happiest when they have a job to do. And that job is taking care of you. So summertime for them, it means fun. The kids are home. They got more activities to do. Life is great. As a parent, you may be thinking, hey, school is rolling around and summer's over and there'll be a little time for me, a little quiet time. Your dog doesn't know that. All he knows is that the party is suddenly over and he's not in it. So, in a perfect world, which there's no such thing, but in a perfect world, you have prepared for it. You would have thought to do things like practice a new routine, leave him home for shorter periods of time, and then increase the duration. And then, maybe get some extra games that are mentally stimulating and things like that. But, people don't operate in a perfect world. So what can you do? Okay. So you take the kids to school. Puppy's in the car. The kids wave goodbye happily. Puppy does not. Oh no, depressed, sad. What to do? You want to change your routine a little bit. A lot of dog trainers say, no, you need to stick to a rigid routine. In this instance, I say vary it. Do something different. Go to the dog park, run an errand, take your dog to a friendly dog store. We have PetSmart and Petco here in California, something like that where they can interact. Let them have something to do. So what you can do is think about maybe enrolling them in a training class. Dogs always need training. It can be basic obedience, it can be agility, it can be whatever. Also, and this is something, if you are a family or your dog is used to being with kids and other people, think about maybe if your dog is suitable for therapy, dog training. That is, I'm sure you know, is when dogs and their owners volunteer to go into certain situations. It can be a children's hospital, it can be a retirement home, it can be almost any type of facility. And they interact with the people who are there. There's never enough dogs. There's never enough dogs. It's pretty easy to go through the training. The dogs enjoy it, it's stimulating, and it gets them out of the house and it gives them something to do until the kids come home.
Okay, let's go back a little bit because you mentioned dog training, and if I'm not mistaken, earlier on a previous situation where we had a chance to chat, did you not say that basically dog training is also training the owner?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The dogs usually pick it up right away with no problem. The owners have a little difficult time. They have some misconceptions of how it's going to be, how their dog's going to react, and so on. But, honestly, Peter, the dog is just having a good time in the training situation. If they're nervous or anxious, it's usually because the owner is. So in situations, I would suggest pick one-on-one with a trainer or a very small class, 2 to 3 other dogs and their owners. So there isn't a lot of emotion, anxiety, nervousness in the air. Dogs pick up on that. So they can get used to being in that type of atmosphere and they'll love it. They'll love it.
Is part of the situation, because you mentioned the fact that dogs pick up on things that humans do or feel, is part of the anxiety of the children going off to school the fact that we may be anxious about the children going off to school?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Dogs know that about you. They know you better, I think, than you don't know yourself. And so they notice that you're doing things a little faster than usual. Maybe you're talking a little faster than usual. Maybe you're the mom and you're not quite as patient in the morning as you were, 2 weeks ago when everybody was going to pack a lunch and go to the beach. And they keep thinking, what's up? What's up? What's up? And they don't know. Remember, their world is very, very small, and you are the center of it. So when things change, they just don't know what to expect. They don't know what's coming next. They don't know it's going to be all right.
Okay, well, one of the questions I've always asked, and I think I kind of asked it as our first question, do dogs have long-term memory? And if they do, is it selective? Because, like I said, they seem to think that when you go away or even go into another room, that you're not coming back.
They don't have the concept of time that we do. They recognize patterns and they recognize routines. So, for example, they know when they wake up that they're going to go outside, they're going to get breakfast, they're going to have a world-class snooze. That's what they know. And that's what they recognize. Do they know that it's going to be for 17 minutes or an hour? No. If you go away, all they know is that you're going away. They don't know that you'll be back, in an hour. It's going to be all right. All they know is that they're by themselves, and that's it. So there are things that you can do before you leave. Try to wear your pup out. Again, this is a perfect world. Not everybody has a lot of time, and I understand that. But if you can take them for a long walk, a fast game of fetch, there's tons of games on the market now. Puzzles that are mentally stimulating for dogs, something that will wear them out. So when then you leave, they're almost like, bye, and they want to curl up and have that world-class snooze. Also, if you have been able to crate tame your dog, they will enjoy a little quiet time in their crate. It's kind of like their puppy clubhouse. They, go there as a place of safety. They feel comfortable there, they feel secure, and they know that you're going to, at some point, they don't know when, but you're going to be there to let them out.
Well, it's interesting because you just brought up crate, and I was about to interject with a question, and that was, do you need to find, whether you have a crate or not, do you have to find or acclimatize the dog to a space that is definitely theirs, that is a safe space for them to go to when you're not around, or even when you are around?
Definitely. Definitely. They like to feel safe and secure, but they need a downtime too. If you're a very active family, I'm thinking of a friend of mine that has 6 very active children. I mean, they are bouncing around all the time. And often I've seen their dog just kind of creep out of the room and go and get into his crate and put his muzzle down on his paws and stay there for a little bit. So sometimes they get too much of a sensory overload. Too much of a good thing can be a good thing. And they need that safe, quiet place, something to call their own. In that respect, I think they're a lot like people in that they need to have some me time, some downtime. It gives them a chance to rejuvenate.
We started this conversation about kids going back to school and the dog being left at home. Does the dog or a dog get acclimatized to a situation the older it gets? In other words, are we talking about a puppy here, or do mature dogs have the same feelings each year?
I think the same feelings exist no matter what the age of the dog is. Dogs slow down when they're older, that's true. And you've reminded me of something that's very important. When you return, let's say from work, and it's just you, or you bring the kids home from school and now the house is very full, and you see your dog, don't go crazy. Don't, hey puppy, hey puppy, hey puppy, come here, come, that's too much. Just come in and say, hey, how was your day? Ruffle his ears or give him a friendly back rub, something like that. Don't go over the top because they're wondering, what happened? What happened?
Ah, okay. So they're seeing the excitement as freaking out to a certain degree?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's a puzzle to them. It's a puzzle to them. You think you're being exuberant in a good way and showing your enthusiasm for them. They're wondering, what's next? They have no idea. So just come in your normal self and just talk to them the way you normally do, which is something else we've talked about in the past. People tend to use that high-pitched voice or the baby voice or something like that. Just talk to them the way they normally do, because if you use a different voice, they're not concentrating what you're saying. They're thinking, who's that?
Yeah. And also, that's the same voice you use when you go to the vet.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Kathleen?
They're not going to believe you that they're going to have a good time there anyway.
Yeah. Kathleen, I thank you once again for being on the program with us. Always a treat to have you on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Kathleen Troy, author of Dear Dylan's Dog Squad. She's also the author of the YA detective mysteries entitled Never Believe a Lie Twice and Never Believe a Con Artist Twice. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0837, and you'll find the link to Kathleen's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
A Bartow County, Georgia man had to pay more than a speeding ticket after being pulled over by Cartersville police. 55-year-old Gilbert Spencer was driving when he passed a patrol car waiting with a radar gun. Spencer was clocked at more than 60 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. The cop pulled Spencer over, told him why he was stopped, and asked him for his driver's license. Spencer instead gave the officer a passport and told him he did not need a driver's license because he was traveling, not driving. When the officer ran Spencer's name through the Georgia Crime Information Center, he learned Spencer had a suspended license for a failure to appear in court. Backup arrived, and when Spencer was asked to leave his vehicle, he refused. Officers had to forcefully remove him from the car. Spencer was arrested for driving with a suspended license, obstruction of law enforcement officers, driving over the limit, and other charges. Now, why, oh why, would you think that if you didn't have a valid driver's license, you could just carry a passport? Because you're not driving, you're traveling? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0837. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0837. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including kdxradio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. We leave you with this deep environmental thought. If we don't do something about global warming soon, eventually there won't be any ice floes left to put our elders on.